I can tell you in 18 years of prosecuting cases, I've never had this much DNA.
What if a crime scene contained so much DNA evidence that the district attorney thought it would be an absolute slam dunk? Turned out it was not.
Juliana Redding was found brutally murdered. She was beaten. Juliana was strangled to death.
21-year-old Juliana Redding, a super hot model, was found brutally murdered in her own home, and the verdict for her killer would send shockwave across the United States.
When I heard that verdict, it was just shock. Just shock.
Hello and welcome back. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell. In today's episode, we're diving into one of the most twisted criminal cases that expose the dark underbelly of Hollywood. Without further ado, let's get started. As Tom approached Jason and Molly's bedroom, he heard Molly screaming. He immediately opened the door, only to find Jason choking Molly, his grip tight around her neck. Molly was struggling, her face contorted and...
Hello, what's your name, please?
Juliana Redding, hi.
When Jason saw Tom standing in the doorway with the bat, he swiftly shifted his position, using Molly as a human shield, keeping his hand around her neck. Tom begged Jason to release Molly, but Jason refused, stepping toward the adjoining bathroom. He warned Tom to back off or he would kill Molly. Acting on instinct, Tom swung the baseball bat, striking Jason on the head to free Molly. Within minutes, officers arrived at Juliana Redding's bungalow. Everything appeared ordinary. There were no signs of forced entry. Her car was parked in the driveway, suggesting she was home. But the house was too silent. Entering the property, they immediately sensed that something was wrong. A candle burned near the main entrance, but a far more alarming detail caught their attention: the distinct smell of natural gas. They quickly found a gas stove left on but unlit, filling the bungalow with flammable fumes. The burning candle and the gas stove had turned the house into a potential time bomb. As officers searched the home, they made a horrifying discovery in the back bedroom. There lay Juliana, lifeless on her bed. She had severe bruising on her head, and her throat had been crushed. The deep purple discoloration on Juliana's feet and thighs showed that her heart had stopped pumping hours earlier, causing blood to pool in those areas. Detectives quickly identified the cause of death. She had been strangled.
It was just after 6 in the evening, March 16th, 2008. Juliana's mother, alarmed that she hadn't heard from her daughter, asked police to come check on her in this small Santa Monica bungalow. When they finally got inside, they found her dead, lying in her bed. She'd been strangled.
Signs of a fierce struggle were evident throughout the apartment. It was clear that Juliana had fought valiantly against her attacker, as her DNA was found under her own fingernails, likely from trying to take their hands out of her throat. The details pointed to a calculated and sinister plan. Whoever killed Juliana not only intended to take her life, but also tried to destroy evidence by setting up the bungalow to explode. The perpetrator left the gas running, hoping that it would ignite from the candle, obliterating the crime scene. Fortunately, the age and structure of the building prevented enough gas from accumulating to trigger an explosion. Investigators concluded that someone entered Juliana Redding's bungalow around 10 p.m. on March 15, 2008. Once inside, the intruder launched a brutal attack. At some point during the struggle, Juliana's head was injured, possibly from being slammed against the floor. The prolonged nature of the assault suggested that the attacker hadn't anticipated Juliana's fierce resistance. When their efforts to overpower her failed, they resorted to strangulation, ultimately ending her life. A chilling discovery in Juliana's phone records revealed that she had attempted to dial 911 during the attack. Tragically, the call disconnected before she could speak to an operator. Adding to the tragic timeline, neighbors told police that they heard noises from the bungalow at 9:53 p.m. Sound of furniture being moved and someone screaming. However, they didn't think much of it at the time. It could have easily been a party or some harmless commotion.
She was always very friendly and always very kind and almost loving. It's kind of scarring, hearing someone crying out for pain and knowing the fact that their crying out for pain was real and they didn't survive.
While it's deeply regrettable that they didn't take action, it's hard to blame them entirely. Nothing else about the situation seemed out of the ordinary. These fragmented details painted a haunting picture of Juliana's final moments. The attack was chaotic, violent, and unexpected. A grim reality that investigators hoped would guide them to the person responsible for such a senseless and cruel act. At the crime scene, investigators collected vital evidence, including multiple DNA samples from the front door, Juliana's phone, her clothing, and even her throat.
So they checked the entire house for DNA and fingerprints, and they find DNA on the victim's cell phone, on the victim's tank top, and even on her neck.
I can tell you in 18 years of prosecuting cases, I've never had this much DNA.
Each sample was sent to a lab for analysis, but results would take months to process. In the meantime, they turned to Juliana's family and friends, piecing together details about her life and relationships. One notable figure in Juliana's past was actor and musician Greg Sipes, whom she had met while filming her first film, Kathy T, in Atlanta. The two had dated and remained in contact for some time after breaking up. However, their contact had ended about 6 months before Juliana's death. Greg Sipes was quickly ruled out as a potential suspect. During an interview, Juliana's father, Greg, urged the police to investigate a man named John Gilmore. Juliana had been in an on-and-off-again relationship with him, and Greg had always been uneasy about this man. Greg explained that Gilmore had a troubling history, including a volatile temper. One time, Gilmore had kicked in Juliana's car door during an argument and even forced his way into her apartment. These aggressive behaviors immediately captured police's attention. They wasted no time locating Gilmore and brought him in for questioning. Gilmore admitted to visiting Juliana's bungalow on Sunday morning, but claimed no one answered the door. He said he peeked through the security gate, noticing a burning candle, but detecting no smell of gas. When investigators asked about the violent incidents reported by Juliana's father, Gilmore didn't deny them. He admitted they had had an argument just 2 nights earlier. The fight began when he called Juliana on Saturday evening, saying he would attend a house party. This obviously upset her, as she abruptly hung up the phone and decided to meet another friend. Despite the argument, Gilmore said they continued texting throughout the evening. However, around 10 p.m., Juliana suddenly stopped replying. The following morning, worried by her silence, he tried calling and sending more texts, but received no response. This prompted his Sunday morning visit to her home, where he found no sign of her and eventually left. At first, Gilmore appeared to be the prime suspect. His temper, past altercations with Juliana, and the timing of their argument painted a troubling picture. but investigators soon uncovered evidence that cleared his name. Surveillance footage from the night of the attack showed Gilmore visiting a convenience store and a Jack in the Box restaurant. Witnesses from the house party corroborated his alibi, confirming that he was there between 9:45 and 10:15 p.m. The final blow to the suspicion against him came when lab results revealed that most of the DNA found at the crime scene belonged to a woman, not a man. Gilmore was ruled out as a suspect, and the investigation was shifted in a new direction. Investigators immediately shifted their focus to the women in Juliana's life. Speculation swirled that jealousy, rivalry, or even a love triangle might have played a role in her death. Investigators collected DNA samples from everyone they interviewed, but none matched the evidence from the crime scene. Just when the case seemed to stalled, a new lead emerged. A man named Munir Uwaida, a doctor with significant connection to Juliana. Munir and Juliana first met in 2007 while she was working as a restaurant hostess. She must have left a strong impression, as Munir soon offered her over $400,000 a year working as his medical assistant. This opportunity seemed like a promising upgrade, and Juliana eagerly accepted. However, their relationship quickly became more than professional. Within months, Munir invited Juliana to move in with him at his lavish Beverly Hills home. He showered her with expensive gifts and promised her a life of luxury. Among his grand gestures was an offer to buy her a Lamborghini for her 21st birthday, and even suggesting a marriage. While this may have felt flattering at first, Juliana soon grew uneasy. Munir's behavior, once charming, began to feel obsessive. His extravagant spending on jewelry, cars, and women seemed less like generosity and more like an attempt to manipulate her. Juliana eventually recognized that her relationship with Munir wasn't healthy and made the decision to end it. She moved to the bungalow in Santa Monica, which her father generously paid for. The breakup appeared amicable at first, and the two even stayed in touch. One of Juliana's friends revealed that one time, Juliana, her friend, and Munir had traveled to Las Vegas to celebrate her birthday. However, Juliana's father, Greg, had become increasingly suspicious of Munir. He hired a private detective to investigate Munir's background, and what he found was deeply unsettling. Munir wasn't just the wealthy, charming man he appeared to be. He was married with 3 children living in Lebanon, a fact he had concealed from Juliana. When Greg shared this information with his daughter, Juliana was shocked and upset. She immediately ended all contact with Munir. It was a decisive and understandable move, given the circumstances. Greg could not simply cut ties with Munir. The two men were working on a pharmaceutical business deal. However, Greg began to question Munir's integrity. If he could deceive Juliana about their relationship, what would stop him from lying about business? Greg's instincts were right. Munir's business practices turned out to be illegal. 5 days after Greg canceled the deal, Juliana was found dead. This coincidence raised red flags, and suspicions about Munir's involvement grew. When learning that Munir had become a potential suspect, an independent news producer named Mitchell Mora came forward with valuable information. He happened to investigate Munir for 8 months now.
8 months before Juliana was murdered, I got in contact with a woman who had been dating Uwaida. And the thing that got my attention about her from the moment I met her was the sheer look of terror in her face.
Then girlfriend of Munir claimed that he had poisoned her, showing a lot of alarming pictures. When the news producer looked into Munir's background, he found multiple allegations of bank fraud, pharmaceutical fraud, and workers' compensation fraud. Munir Uwaida had used his title as a board-certified orthopedic surgeon to scam money. In 2001, he allegedly purchased a $1 million CT scanner in Europe for his affiliates in Saudi Arabia, but failed to pay for it. Federal courts in Ohio declared this act as fraudulent, and Munir had to file for bankruptcy. In 2005, Munir was convicted of scamming a medical supply company and filing fraudulent insurance claims, possibly worth millions. In 2009, Munir faced proceedings in California to revoke his medical license for letting an assistant start surgeries without his presence. These allegations included claims of gross negligence. While the accusations were not resolved, They highlighted his troubled professional and legal history. Munir Uwaida became the prime suspect in Juliana's murder. However, the most damning problem emerged. His DNA was not found at the crime scene. Police turned their focus to his past, hoping to uncover any connections that might link him to the crime. Whenever investigators reached a dead end, Juliana's father, Greg, seemed to provide a new lead. This time, he remembered Munir once boasted about having a female James Bond working for him, a woman named Kelly Sue Park. Park was described as a debt collector and enforcer, someone Munir trusted to handle tough situations. After interviewing other women who had worked for Munir over the years, investigators zeroed in on Kelly Sue Park as their primary suspect. Business records revealed that Park had worked with Munir in the past as a real estate broker and had been involved in several of his business deals. However, what raised red flags were the enormous payments she had received from him. Over $1 million in just 18 months. Notably, 3 weeks before Juliana's murder, Park received a $250,000 payment. 18 months later, in June 2010, her family received a payment of $113,400. These payments were in addition to a monthly $10,000 salary Munir had been paying Park since at least 2008. Investigators suspected that Park might be connected to Juliana's murder. To confirm their theory, they decided to obtain a DNA sample from Park. Knowing that she might alert Munir if she discovered their intentions, they chose to act discreetly. They placed her under surveillance, patiently waiting for an opportunity to collect a sample without her knowledge. Their efforts paid off when they retrieved one of her discarded cigarette butts. The DNA from the cigarette was sent for analysis, and soon, investigators received the news they had been waiting for. Kelly Sue Park's DNA was a perfect match for the samples collected from Juliana's bungalow. This breakthrough left no doubt. Park had been present at the crime scene. Her involvement strongly suggested a link to Munir, though his exact role remained unclear. On Friday, June 18, 2010, Santa Monica police arrested 44-year-old Kelly Sue Park on suspicion of murder with special circumstances and conspiracy. Her bail was requested to be set at a staggering $5 million. However, on that very same day, Munir Uwaida fled the country. He reportedly crossed the border into either Canada or Mexico. Investigators believed he had escaped to Lebanon, likely to evade law enforcement. Following Kelly Sue Park's arrest, authorities froze several bank accounts connected to her. These accounts belonged to her mother and 2 unnamed individuals. During the bail hearing, prosecutors played a recording of a phone call between Park and her sister. In the recording, Park's sister assured her that Munir is going to bail you out. Prosecutors found out that Munir had begun moving tens of millions of dollars into overseas accounts, possibly to fund Park's escape. On Tuesday, July 20, 2010, Judge Keith Schwartz set Park's bail at $3.5 million, with strict conditions requiring proof that the bond money came from legitimate sources. When news of Kelly Sue Park's arrest broke, media outlets highlighted her history of intimidation tactics, particularly on behalf of Munir. Reports detailed how Park had previously pressured individuals who stood in the way of Munir's business dealings. She once intimidated a bank manager who had canceled a deal. Another time, she targeted a client who failed to meet payment obligations. With such a background, it wasn't far-fetched to suspect that she was involved in Juliana's murder. The media also discussed the motive of Munir's crime. One theory suggested that he couldn't accept the end of his relationship with Juliana, or was angered when his business deal with her father fell apart. So, Munir hired Park to retaliate. Another widely accepted theory was that Munir had instructed Park to intimidate Juliana's father in an effort to revive their business deal. Park was sent to Juliana's apartment to deliver a threatening message. However, when Juliana resisted and fought back, the situation escalated to a violent struggle, resulting in Juliana's tragic death. Despite the mounting evidence against her, Park pleaded not guilty to second-degree homicide charges. Her defense team argued that she and Juliana had never met, with their only connection being Munir, who was out of the country. In May 2013, 5 years after Juliana's murder, Kelly Sue Park's trial finally began. The prosecution had prepared an airtight case built around DNA evidence. In the crime scene, Park's DNA was found on Juliana's clothing, inside the locks of the front door, on the telephone, and most incriminatingly, on Juliana's throat. Crime scene investigators also discovered a drop of blood on a plate in the kitchen sink, alongside a fingerprint that matched Park. Prosecutors argued this was indisputable proof that Park had been in the apartment on the night of the murder. Since there was no evidence that the two women had any prior relationship, Park had no legitimate reason to be there unless she was carrying out an attack. Park was described as a formidable figure, nearly 6 feet tall, confident, and physically imposing. Prosecutors asserted that Park was the person who had manually strangled Juliana, even crushing a bone in her throat, a detail that underscored the violent and personal nature of the crime. Just when prosecutors thought they had an open and shut case, Park's defense team introduced a shocking theory that completely turned the legal battle on its head. Kelly Sue Park's defense team came prepared with a robust strategy, introducing alternative theories and sowing doubt about her involvement in Juliana's murder. Their arguments focused on the uncertainties of the crime, exploiting the lack of witnesses, and offering explanations for the DNA evidence. The cornerstone of their case was the DNA transfer theory, which suggested that Park's DNA could have ended up in Juliana's home, without her ever being there. They proposed 2 scenarios. The first one was contact contamination. Park may have touched an item that was later handled by Juliana's killer, who transferred her DNA to the crime scene.
Well, primary transfer of DNA is if you have any object that you touch, you're going to very likely leave behind some of your DNA.
All right, so what if I touch the beaker, I pick it up, I put it down, and you pick it up?
So, first of all, I'm going to deposit my DNA now, mixed in with yours on the glass, and I very well might pick up some of yours. That would be called a secondary transfer. So if someone were to swab my hand later, they might get some of your DNA on my hand, with the cup being the intermediate.
And is that common?
We don't see a lot of secondary DNA transfers in casework.
The second scenario was towel connection. The defense pointed to a towel that Park had used months earlier at Munir's home, where she was known to visit as his business associate. They argued that the killer could have used this towel to wipe away fingerprints or other evidence, transferring Park's DNA to Juliana's apartment. The defense argued this was how Park's DNA was found on items like the locks, phone, and even Juliana's throat without her physically being at the scene. About the $1 million, the defense claimed it was payment for legitimate business transactions, unrelated to any criminal activity. To counter Park's defense strategy, prosecutors made shocking allegations about the relationship of Munir and Park. They alleged that Park was a paid enforcer, or even an assassin, that did all the dirty jobs for Munir. Besides Juliana's murder, Munir and Park had worked together on a health insurance fraud scheme, which was still under investigation. Prosecutors presented Park's phone records, which revealed suspicious activity. She had made calls to Juliana's workplace and was near her bungalow one day before the murder. They argued that Park was staking out Juliana's apartment and gathering information as part of a premeditated and calculated plan. The trial dragged on until 2013, a grueling process that left many wondering whether justice would prevail. The evidence, the allegations, and the larger-than-life personas of those involved made it a case like no other. Finally, on June 3, 2013, after 7 days of deliberations, the jury delivered a verdict that stunned everyone.
We, the jury in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Kelly Sue Park, not guilty of the crime of second-degree murder of Juliana Redding, a human being.
Kelly Sue Park was found not guilty. The reaction in the courtroom was explosive. Juliana's friends and family, who had faithfully attended the trial, expressed their outrage, shouting that Park was guilty as she was escorted out of the courtroom.
Murder! Quiet! Something wrong here.
For Juliana's family, the verdict was a bitter blow. They issued a written statement expressing their heartbreak and disbelief at the outcome, crying that justice had not been served. As for Munir, the man whose connections seemed to tie everyone in the case together, he remained out of reach. Having left the United States for Lebanon, a country with no extradition treaty with the U.S., he was untouchable. Lebanon's policies of shielding its citizens meant that, as long as he stayed there, Munir would never face questioning or trial for his potential role in the case. In 2015, Munir was arrested in Germany on suspicion of medical fraud. He had allowed an unqualified assistant, someone who had never attended medical school, to perform surgeries. Over 20 patients came forward with claims of permanent disfigurement from these botched.
Good morning. 2 grand jury indictments revealed what California prosecutors called an organized criminal enterprise, with Dr. Munir Uwaida as the ringleader. He and his staff are accused of putting greed over the health of patients, with allegations of conspiracy and insurance fraud spanning more than a decade.
Despite these allegations, Munir was released and returned to Lebanon, shielded from all kinds of accountability. Kelly Sue Park was also arrested in the 2015 German case, facing charges of conspiracy, deceiving patients, and defrauding insurance companies of $150 million. Additionally, she was accused of involvement in surgeries that left patients permanently disfigured. Released on $1.5 million bail, Park once again escaped justice, slipping out of reach. In the end, the only thing American authorities could do was to cancel California medical license of Munir Uwaida. Juliana's case will remain forever unsolved. Even with solid evidence, justice is not guaranteed. And that's the end of today's video. What do you think? Have you heard of other cases where someone with so much DNA evidence against them walked free? Did wealth and power play a role in delaying justice? Should there be better ways to stop suspects from escaping the country? Feel free to share in the comments. If there's a case you're interested in, let us know. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.